Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Today's show is a tour of Notre Dame, literally from 1163 to 2021. Now, part of this is a section that I did for my Western Civ class on the Middle Ages, the Church and the Crusades, and this is part of it will be the section on Notre Dame, and that will include the fire, which you see here in this picture. Then once that is finished, Professor Sheri will do the introduction for the next part, because we have just recently come back from Paris, and we have pictures of what Notre Dame looks like today, both during the day and at night. So I hope you enjoy the show. It was a cloudy day in 2013 when Sheri and I went to visit Notre Dame, and by the way, that was our honeymoon. You couldn't really get a good picture of the front of it because there's a stand in front of it. They were celebrating the 850th anniversary of Notre Dame. So we went in and took pictures, and a lot of these you'll see in the video that's coming later. But unfortunately, this picture of Notre Dame seeing the fire from approximately the same position. And of course, it's a miracle that this building survived, but it has, because in this picture, we are in 2021 standing in front of Notre Dame as she rises from the ashes. We come to Notre Dame. Everybody recognizes Notre Dame. Great Gothic cathedral. And just some information on it. It was originally the site of the Temple of Jupiter during Roman times. And then during the Merovingian era, they put a church on it, the St. Etienne. During the Carolingian time, they made it the Church of St. Marie. Now, the Notre Dame Cathedral was built in 1163 to 1250. It takes a while to put these up, and sometimes it's the bell towers that take the longest. 426 feet long, 157 feet wide, and 115 feet high. And of course, we are well aware of the fact that in 2019, the church caught fire. And it's a miracle that this church survived. And I think that part of it is a result of the wonderful architecture of the Gothic that held those walls up. But we'll look at those pictures later. As a matter of fact, Sheri and I had attended Mass here a few months before the fire broke out. Here's an aerial view of the Ile de la Cité. And you'll see Notre Dame there in the lower part. And there's another church further up, and that is the Church of Sainte-Chapelle. Although both churches are the king's churches, Sainte-Chapelle was kind of the private church of the king. And here is Notre Dame, a view from the front. Now, Sheri and I have been in here on several occasions, and I've seen it 2 other times. I think I've seen it 5 times because I saw it twice, and the first time I was there in 87, and then we were here on our honeymoon, and then we have since come back on 2 other occasions. And here's a shot of it from the front, and again you see that they have the protection and the stained glass. Looking at the towers, get a little closer. It's hard to really get, you've got to get quite a distance away. And then here's the, we didn't see the Hunchback while we were there, but you can take a tour. You used to be able to take a tour of the towers and other places. Now this is the view when we were there a second time. They were having an anniversary of the church, and so they had this great set of seats in front of it. So I'm up on top of the seats shooting pictures of the entrance. This is the royal entrance. The king would have gone into the center of the church, and only the king and his family, and then the nobles on either side, and then the rest of the people would have come in on the two sides of the church. Now, this isn't fancily adorned. It's been cleaned, but this is what it might have looked like. This is actually the church at Amiens. They do a sound and light show on it in the summertime where they project onto it what it would have looked like at the time it was finished. So if you can imagine the portals of Notre Dame looking like this, you can see how stunning it would be. And then this is a close-up of the center portal, which is the portal of judgment. Then you walk into the church, and you have this long aisle, then the nave down to the center of the church. And then this is a view from the second story. And then here you have the rose windows. When I was here in 87, I took pictures in Notre Dame. I'm going, well, you know, when you see Notre Dame, you see them all. And then, of course, we went on the countryside and went to Chartres and some of the other places. So it's stunning to see this stained glass. But if you were on the outside of the building, that would be just plain. And you see that if you look in the back and you see the organ, obviously the church was built well before there were organs, and so it kind of covers up that particular rose window. Then here's the modern altar, the bronze altar in front, with the one to Mary being assumed in the heaven in the back. And there's one of the side rose windows. And then there's a side room where they keep a lot of the relics. And these are some of the reliquaries or objects that would have been used in special services or held pieces of saints and what have you. And they have a little stained glass window in there. Of course, most people talk about the gargoyles, and you can see the gargoyles along the side. It's really fun when you get on the roof to see them close up. And the reason you have these, and they're minions of the devil, okay? They decided to give them a good use. If you didn't have gargoyles and you let the water run down the side of the church, it would erode it away. This spews it out away and keeps the church looking better. But in this picture, you can see the buttresses, and then you can see the tower in the middle, the black tower. And there are statues on that. But that's what happens if you don't clean the building. That is the soot from the car exhaust and everything else and age on the building. And of course, it is that piece that collapsed and right through the middle of the building. And then here it is at night on a view of taking one of the cruises. Now, as I said before, Sheri and I were here a few months before the Great Fire. Watching that church burn was really difficult. I was just positive it was not going to survive. It was a superhuman effort on the part of the firemen of Paris to put that fire out. But when we went, they have services on Sunday, and they have them in different languages. The earlier services are in French, and then at 9 o'clock, there's a service in Gregorian. In other words, the church would sound spoken word of the priest and the sound of the music in the choir as it would have been in the Middle Ages. So that is the one we went to. They do 11 o'clock one, which is in English. Who wants to hear it in English? I wanted to hear it in Gregorian. So I don't usually do this in churches, but I did this time. I have a sound recording of part of the service with the choir singing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that play as I show you the pictures of the fire. And then when I get to the last picture, I'll then tell you something about it. This picture that you see, which was one of the early ones that was released after some of the people to check the interior. The funny thing about this picture is Sheri and I sat probably right here during the church service. So it was amazing to see this much of the interior had survived. When you watch the inferno that is taking place, it's amazing. But this is where we sat during that church service. And I hope that when it's restored, Sheri and I can go back and go in and enjoy another service once again.
Welcome to Paris. It's September of 2021. We were here a couple of months before the fire, and we watched the fire on our television. Now we're here to see the reconstruction. The art is beautiful. The razor wire is a little bit disconcerting, but knowing she's being rebuilt is just right to the heart.
We arrived in Paris on September the 27th, and our intention was to spend 2 nights in Paris before beginning our vacation, going out to the Loire and other places. And the hotel that we stayed in was the Hotel Citizen M, which is not far from the Gare de Lyon and the Gare d'Austerlitz, and that's the train station that we'll take to go out to the Loire. But this is the view out of our window of Notre Dame, and we will go down to Notre Dame the next day as part of our walk to the Arc de Triomphe and down the Champs-Élysées to take the day pictures of Notre Dame, because we end up with a beautiful day. I'm going to use this map of the Ile de la Cité to show you the route that we took to take the pictures. We come in the main square in front of Notre Dame, and that's where you'll see the pictures of the towers and then the posters that are around the front of it. And then we'll go down the Rue de Notre Dame, and that's the closest you can get to the building. You can get some really good shots. It's not too much different from the way it was years ago, but there is a pushback. You can see where the scaffolding is. So you get some great views of the church from that angle. In addition, the wall that they've put up to keep people out has lots of pictures showing what's going on inside. Now the green area around the church, which was park, that's where they have all the equipment. They've got all their buildings. They've got a giant crane. So we'll go down to the bridge at the very tip and then cross over and then shoot pictures down the Seine as we go and head back towards the other direction so we can get pictures from the front. So that's the route that we're going to take. And we'll use the same route when we do the night pictures, when we come back toward the end of our vacation. Here we are in the front of Notre Dame, and you can see the crane and the building and, of course, the wall that separates everybody, keeps the workers safe and the people. Relatively small crowd, and it's not really too bad during the regular week, but on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, it's crazy. Now, along that wall are posters that were made by children of France. So here's one where you have the whole class. They've drawn this picture of the side of Notre Dame, and it has all of their names on it. And then here you have one showing the front of the building with the fire. Just so touching. And this is one of our favorites. This is the one with Notre Dame protecting the church. And then this last one shows her encompassing the front of the church with her blue cloak. So it's really quite touching to see this. And they change these out every so often. Now let's take a walk down the Rue de Notre Dame, going around the tower off to the left-hand side. And here we are on the street, and you can see that you're relatively close to the building. You're basically standing in the middle of the street, and they do have some traffic that comes through. But you get a look up at the tower, and then here's looking down the street. You see one whole section where it's in pretty good condition. Of course, they've all been cleaned after the fire at this point, because it's been a couple of years. And then you can see some of the gargoyles, some of the statues, and then looking through, you can see the work being done on the arches. And then as we go a little further down the street, now we get into the section where they have the scaffolding up, and they have this extensive scaffolding all over the church on both sides. And then here's a shot of a spot between the scaffoldings. And again, you can see the windows, and then you can see part of the church up here, the arches. And they're really working on those arches to make sure they can still hold up all of that material. And then moving down to the next section, you see as you get closer to the back of the church, there's much more damage, because this is where the roof, the whole roof collapsed, but this was the more intense section of the fire. So this final shot as you look towards the back of the church. It's here at the back of the church that you can see the supports holding up the arches. You can see like 3 of them in here. And then along the wall, they had this picture showing the workmen putting these forms together to make the temporary arches while they work on the building. And look at the bolts that are there. And then here's a shot as we start walking away from the back of the church, where you can see a little better those arch supports on those buttresses. Just unbelievable. Here we are completely at the back of the church, and as you can see, the trees survived. It's amazing that those trees were still able to survive. But as we're walking across the area to cross the bridge to get to the other side, here's 2 pictures that were on the wall giving you an aerial view of the restoration going on. Here's the one where you can look down and see the gigantic open space, which is, of course, where the tower was located. And that whole area was completely destroyed. But this is where all of the real work is being done. And then here's a closer drone aerial view showing the buttresses with their supports in place as they're working on the windows and the side of the church itself. You can learn a lot by looking at everything that's on the wall. It's very well explained. Well, we've just finished crossing the little bridge, and now we're walking back to the front on the opposite side of the Ile de la Cité. Obviously, you can see the construction offices sitting there and the giant crane that's moving all the material. Just dwarfs Notre Dame. A little further down, you get a good view of this side. And again, you can see trees, parts of the garden area. But again, they're doing a pretty good job of moving this along. Now, I know President Macron wants this done for the Olympics, but I don't see how in 2 years they can finish this. Here's a little closer shot, where here's the other section towards the front with the towers, just to the left-hand side. So windows, obviously they're working on those. They're working on the walls, keeping the buttresses. All the buttresses have been supported. And then here we have the towers again. Unbelievable that the church is still standing, because one of the biggest problem with churches even in the Middle Ages was if the fire gets into that attic area, there's no fire breaks. It just goes right through and they just burn down. I mean, when we were at Chartres Cathedral, it has a whole list of times that it was burnt down. Once by lightning, and once by attack, and then once by candles and all sorts of things. So, but the massive reconstruction is just mind-boggling. So after this, Sheri and I then went on our tour of the rest of France. We'll be out in the countryside for about 2 weeks. And when we come back, we're actually staying in a hotel that's closer. After 2 weeks out in the countryside, we came back for our last week of our vacation, Paris. And our hotel is located right here, near the Place de Saint-Michel. And that allowed us to do night pictures. It's the first thing we did after we checked in. When it got dark, we went and took pictures of Notre Dame at night. The detail that you can get on the building at night is just spectacular. Here we are again in the front, and you can see at the dark, they've got some light on it. They don't have it overlit. But one of the things that you can see better in the dark is the statue of Our Lady of Notre Dame. They have her on a pillar, but at the sunlight, you don't quite get the same detail as you do at night. And then we went on our trip around down the Rue de Notre Dame. So here's the towers from right up in front. And here we are getting around the tree so we can get a little better shot up in the top. And then there's looking down the street. There's people out all the time. And you can see the gargoyles jutting out from the side. Here's a good shot of them, and they really obviously show up with the lighting on them. And then again, we go back down to where the walls begin to be covered with scaffolding, and they're working day and night on this building. And then ultimately, we end up back at the end, because after you go by that one tower that you see lit up, it's dark, so you can't take any more pictures. So now let's go around to the other side. And here we are at the very back of the church. You can barely see the back of the church, but you can certainly see the gigantic crane. And then after we've crossed the bridge, here's the distant shot of the church with its crane, which is extremely well lit up. And then as we go further down, it's a nice shot of the church off to the side. Again, they're pretty nicely lit up. And then you get the side with the towers. And that is our wonderful walk around Notre Dame in the dark. Sheri and I did go by one last time before we left. Saturday, which was the day before we went out to the airport, we went shopping, and here we are at Notre Dame, getting a beautiful shot of it, and the crowd is everywhere. There's people everywhere, and I've got another picture here. But we had to take one last shot. It's not a good selfie, but it's the best we could do. So we hope you enjoyed Notre Dame. Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.